Welcome back to Day of the Swan 3, our third version of making sense of the future by looking through the past and gathering together amazing people with amazing thoughts, with amazing insights. We've just taken us through, Howard and Gina just took us through the Omni Future, a world without snow. But now we're going to switch and talk about leadership with one of the great Platinum Swans, a producer who is always there for her community, working with multiple groups to make the world a different place. Every time I work with Louise, I learn something. Her craft is intense. Her background from finance and banking through to growing companies with staffing and executive coaching. She's a force of nature. I always want to be in her time zone. Louise, please let us enjoy your mind.
Thank you, Rob. I hope I can live up to all of that. That's a great introduction. So just wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for the slot to be able to come and chat to everybody. I'm going to switch over to sharing my screen. And I'm actually using Canva for the first time to share. So before I start moving ahead, I just want to make sure, can everybody see my screen? Is it as clear as it should be? Yeah, all good. Okay, yes. So as Rob said, today I'm going to be talking to you about future-focused leadership. I've got a lot to get through, but I've tried to keep some time at the end for some Q&A, and I'm hoping that somebody, Eva, I'm hoping will keep an eye on the chat for me, and that we'll have some time to get into more of a discussion at the end of it. So just to give you a little bit of background, in my role working one-to-one with senior leaders and with C-suite teams, there are two big questions that have become a constant over the last 5 years. The first is, how do we make sense of where we are and what's coming so that we can make better decisions and act on them today for a better future? And the second is, who do we need to be, or who do we need to become? And what do we need to learn to navigate our world with much more ease? And working with these questions has inspired me to dig a little deeper into various philosophies, systems, frameworks, tools, and models to support my clients. And in the spirit of common sense making, our Day of the Swan theme this year, I'll be sharing some of these with you today. So what you're looking at is a lot. It's the broad framework for future-focused leadership. At the core are 5 frameworks or lenses on the world, which serve us in making better sense of what's going on, and most importantly, when and how to use them. Surrounding them and the next layer around them are the behavioral traits and qualities, and then the skills and capabilities that build our future fitness, in the same way that we might build muscles in the gym or a new neural pathway when we learn a musical instrument. The idea of us understanding the world through a set of lenses or filters isn't a new one. We all have a talent for connecting the dots, spotting patterns, making sense of things from a trained eye in our area of expertise and through the lenses of our life experiences. In exploring these lenses, Alfred Korzybski's famous words spring to mind. The map is not the territory, meaning that we shouldn't confuse conceptual models of reality with reality itself. Rather, we should take what we learn and apply it to our lives, our businesses, and our communities, and make it our own. But before we get into the detail, it's worth acknowledging where we are. Peter Drucker allegedly proclaimed culture eats strategy for breakfast, meaning that no matter how well designed your strategy, it'll fall flat unless your team shares a compelling culture. However, today, I think we're better off zooming out to begin with and thinking in broader terms of context, eating strategy all day long, meaning that no matter how brilliant our strategic plans, a change in context can derail them without any notice at all. Context is essentially a snapshot of where we are in space and time. Today, we're living and working in 2 overarching interconnected contexts, that of complexity and uncertainty. And I know that certainly in this room today, we're all very familiar we're thinking about and working with those two contexts. The pace and intensity of change have increased in recent years, which means that our context at any given moment is much more fluid and dynamic than ever before. If you think back to your strategy for 2019 and the context it was created in, and then compare it to that of each of the years between 2020 and 2023, you'll know that they're completely different. In 3 short years, we've experienced a global pandemic, disruption to our global supply chains, and Russia's war on Ukraine, which has provoked a global energy crisis, not to mention all of the regional or country-specific events and natural disasters that have impacted where and how we live. So I think Stephen Hawking in January 2000, I should say, said it best. He said that I think the next century will be the century of complexity. And what's really interesting about complexity and uncertainty is that for complexity, we actually need adaptive behavior, whereas uncertainty produces an acute stress response. So uncertainty arises out of complexity, and it's incredibly tough to deal with. Typically, we instinctively react by throwing ourselves into a hive of activity, or sitting tight and doing nothing, or by retreating into the known and familiar, essentially attempting to ignore what's going on around us. In 2016, a team of researchers conducted a groundbreaking formal study to discover the relationship between stress and uncertainty. They found that uncertainty produces an acute stress response, which explains why we'll instinctively do absolutely anything to avoid it. In other words, we would rather choose to deal with a known negative outcome than make a decision where we have absolutely no idea what the result will be. It also sheds light on why so many people are feeling the heavy mental and emotional toll of the last few years, where very few outcomes could have been predictable. In this context, we need new ways of thinking about and understanding the interconnected and rapidly changing world we live and work in. When Einstein was asked what was most helpful to him in developing the theory of relativity, he replied, figuring out how to think about the problem. When we think about the context we're in, we also need to consider how we interpret it. We go through our lives creating mental models, or what I prefer to think of as our lenses on the world, to help us to make sense of what's going on around us and to predict what may come next. These cognitive structures, or our internal representations of reality, act as filters, providing mental shortcuts or heuristics to quickly interpret and process the vast amount of information we encounter every day. They also play a critical role in our ability to navigate and adapt to new situations. These invisible frameworks are formed through our experiences, our backgrounds, and education, and they serve as the foundation for our thoughts, beliefs, and decision-making. They're informed by the way we've grown up and been schooled and trained, by a myriad of life experiences, and the encouragement and criticisms we've had in our personal and professional lives, by our wins and our losses, our highs and our lows. Our thinking is also deeply rooted in our bias for certainty and what has and hasn't worked well for us in the past, which impacts all of our decisions day to day. These lenses or ways of making sense of the world contain our past, and unless we do something to disrupt their trajectory, they map our future. The way we think, or the way that we perceive and think